My son cut off all communication with me for 13 years until he found out I was a newly minted millionaire. Then, he showed up at my front door with suitcases and his wife. "As your son, I have a right to a share of this," he said. "We're moving in. You have too much space anyway." I smiled and did what I should have done a long time ago. His audacity hit me like a freight train. Charles was standing in my entryway with his designer luggage, and that arrogant smirk I remembered all too well, 13 years of silence, and that was his grand reunion speech. If you are reading this, subscribe and tell me where you're reading from. My name is Eleanor, and this is my story. I suppose I should explain how we got here, how my own son could plant himself on my doorstep after more than a decade, treating me as if I were already dead, demanding a cut of a fortune he had only just learned about. But first, let me tell you what happened next, because there are moments worth savoring. I smiled at Charles and his wife, Natalie, who hung back a little, as if she expected me to start throwing things. Smart woman. "Well," I said, my voice as steady as granite. "Isn't this interesting?" Charles's confidence wavered for just a split second. He wasn't expecting calm. He was expecting the desperate, grateful mother he had abandoned all those years ago. "Mom, we've been thinking," he started, but I held up a hand. "Charles, honey," I said, using the exact same tone I used when he was 5 years old and had colored on the living room wall with a permanent marker. "Before you say another word, there is something you should know about your mother." I paused, studying his face carefully. In 13 years, I've learned a lot about people, especially about family, that only shows up when there's money involved. Natalie finally stepped forward with a smile, as fake as her Louis Vuitton knockoff. "Eleanor, we know there's been distance, but family is family. We want to rebuild our relationship." "Rebuild," I laughed, and it felt good, really good. "Honey, you can't rebuild something that was deliberately demolished." I looked at the two of them, these vultures circling what they thought was easy prey. "But please, come in. Let's talk about relationships. Let's talk about rights. Let's talk about exactly what you think you deserve from me." As they pushed their suitcases past me into the foyer, I caught Charles's reflection in the hallway mirror. For just a moment, he looked unsure. Good, because what he was about to learn was going to rip that arrogance out by the roots. The real question wasn't whether I was going to let them stay. The real question was whether they would want to leave once they understood exactly who they were dealing with. "This place is smaller than I expected," Natalie announced, her eyes already calculating square footage and resale value. She had that look some women get when they are mentally redecorating someone else's house. Charles was doing the same, only he was evaluating everything as if he were already planning the estate sale. If these two thought they were dealing with the same broken woman who had begged for crumbs of their attention 13 years ago, they were in for a surprise that was going to curl every hair on their perfectly coiffed heads. I led them into the living room, the same living room where Charles had delivered his final blow so many years before. "Sit down," I said, pointing to the sofa. "Let's catch up." The irony wasn't lost on me that this was probably the first time in his adult life that Charles was following an instruction of mine. "We heard about your good fortune," Natalie began, clearly the designated spokesperson for this little expedition. "Charles has been worried about you, haven't you, sweetie?" Charles nodded with the enthusiasm of a man who had rehearsed this speech in front of the bathroom mirror. "Yeah, Mom. When I heard about the lottery, I thought you shouldn't handle all that money alone. It's dangerous. People could take advantage." I almost choked on my coffee. "Take advantage," I repeated slowly. "You mean like showing up uninvited after 13 years of silence, demanding a place to live and access to money you didn't help earn?" "That's not what this is," Charles said quickly, but his eyes darted away from mine. "This is about family responsibility, about making sure you're protected." Protected. I set my cup down with deliberate care. "Charles, the last time we spoke, you told me I was an embarrassment to your new life. You said successful people don't drag their baggage around, and that I was your baggage. Those were your exact words." The color drained from his face. Natalie's fake smile flickered like a light bulb about to burn out. "That was different," he muttered. "I was young. I was stressed about the business." "You were 32, I interrupted. "Old enough to know that words have consequences. Old enough to understand that some doors, once closed, don't open automatically just because circumstances change." Natalie intervened with a voice sweet as molasses and a calculated concern. Eleanor, we all say things we regret when we're under pressure. What matters is that we are here now, ready to be a family again. Ready to be a family again? That was rich coming from a woman who had helped orchestrate my exile from their lives. I looked at those two people sitting in my living room and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: absolute control. They needed something from me, which meant that for the first time in our relationship, I held all the cards. "Tell me," I said, leaning back in my chair, "exactly how much of my good fortune do you think belongs to you?" Charles and Natalie exchanged that look married couples share when they are about to attack as a team. I had seen it before, back when they were systematically cutting me out of their lives. The difference was that this time, I recognized it for what it was: a real-time strategy meeting. "It's not about rights," Charles said, trying to sound sincere and landing dangerously close to pathetic. "It's about family obligation. About making sure this money doesn't change you or make you vulnerable to the wrong people." "The wrong people," I repeated. "You mean people like my own son and daughter-in-law, who vanished the moment they decided I was no longer useful to them?" Natalie's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something sharp and calculating beneath. "Eleanor, we understand you're hurt, but we're talking about your future, your security. This money could last you the rest of your life if it's managed correctly." "Managed correctly," I said. "By whom? By you two? The same people who couldn't send me a birthday card for over a decade?" Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We've been busy building our lives, our careers. We had to focus on our priorities. And now I'm a priority again. How convenient." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "Tell me about these lives you've been building, about this focus on priorities. I'm curious to know how that's worked out for you." The silence behind me stretched long enough for me to know I had hit a nerve. When I turned around, Charles was staring at his hands as if they held the secrets of the universe. "We've hit a few bumps," Natalie admitted, her voice tighter now. "The market has been complicated. Charles's consulting business has been slower than expected." "Bumps," I nodded. "That's what we're going to call it? Because from what I've heard through mutual acquaintances, yes, I still have friends in this town. Your bumps include maxed out credit cards, a second mortgage, and a business that exists mostly on paper." Charles's head snapped up. "How do you know those things?" "Charles, you cut me out of your life, not out of the city. People talk, and they've been talking for years." I sat back down, enjoying how they both seemed to shrink into the sofa. They told me about the failed partnerships, the bad investments, the lifestyle you couldn't actually afford. And they also told me something interesting about why you really ended our relationship 13 years ago. Natalie's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean the real reason you decided I was an embarrassment. It had nothing to do with success, or baggage, or all that nonsense you told me." I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile I'd had in years. "It was about the inheritance you thought your father's wealthy Uncle Robert was going to leave you. The same uncle who made it very clear he didn't approve of people who couldn't take care of their own aging mother." The expression on Charles's face told me everything. "Exactly," I said. "You threw me in the trash because you thought Uncle Robert would leave you his money if you proved you were independent, successful, and free of family burdens." I leaned forward. "And how did that plan work out for you?" Charles's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a sickly gray. Natalie, to her credit, tried to maintain her composure, but I could see her frantically recalculating the plan they had hatched in the car. "Uncle Robert left his money to the animal shelter," Charles whispered. "Everything? Every penny?" I asked, making no attempt to hide my satisfaction. Wow. Turns out he had very strong opinions about people who abandon their elderly parents for money. Who would have guessed? Natalie was the first to find her voice. "That is ancient history, Eleanor. What matters is the future. What matters is family supporting each other in tough times." Family supporting each other. I rolled those words around in my mind as if tasting a fine wine. "How interesting coming from you," I said. "Remind me, Natalie, at what exact moment did you start considering me family? Because I remember perfectly well that at your housewarming party, you referred to me as Charles's burden." She flinched. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "But I did hear it," I replied. "That and several other equally revealing comments about how much better your lives would be once you resolved the mother issue." I stood up again and walked to the mantelpiece where I kept my family photos. They were all from before Charles's marriage. I spent 13 years wondering what I had done wrong. 13 years thinking that somehow I had failed as a mother. I picked up a photo of Charles on his college graduation day, his arm around me, both of us grinning from ear to ear. But I didn't fail, did I? I said quietly. I raised a kind, considerate, generous son. The failure was what happened after he met you. That's not fair, Charles protested weakly. Fair? I turned to face them both. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been a conversation before cutting off all contact. Fair would have been honesty about your true intentions. Fair would have been treating your mother like a human being and not a problem to be managed. We made mistakes, Natalie said, her voice sharpened by rising desperation. But we are here now. We want to fix things. Fix things, I repeated. With my money. It's not about the money, Charles insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Oh, no? I said. Then let's try a little experiment. I walked over to my purse and pulled out my checkbook. Let's say I write you a check right now for $50,000, a generous gift to help you with those bumps you mentioned. Would you take it and leave? Their eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. The answer was written on their faces before Charles even opened his mouth. We couldn't accept such a large amount, he said, even though he was already spending it mentally. Maybe we could come to some sort of agreement. A loan. A loan, I repeated. Sure. And I assume you'd want to discuss the terms of that loan while living in my house, eating my food, and enjoying my hospitality. Well, we are family, Natalie said, as if that explained everything. Yes, I nodded. We are family. And that is precisely why what comes next is going to hurt so much. I snapped the checkbook shut with a sharp crack. Charles and Natalie flinched. I realized they had been holding their breath, waiting for me to start writing. The thing about family, I said, settling into my chair like a queen on her throne, is that it works both ways. Loyalty, support, love, they aren't one-way streets you can drive down only when it suits you. Mom, we know we haven't been perfect, Charles started. Perfect? I laughed, and the sound came out sharp enough to cut glass. Charles, perfect, would have been calling me on Mother's Day. Perfect would have been including me in your lives instead of hiding me like a shameful secret. What you two did wasn't imperfection, it was calculated cruelty. Natalie leaned forward on the sofa, desperation now showing without disguise. Eleanor, we are willing to acknowledge our mistakes. We want to build a better relationship from now on. Build a better relationship, I repeated thoughtfully. Starting when? Starting the moment you found out I won the lottery? What a remarkable coincidence that your desire for family reconciliation surged at the exact same time my financial situation changed. Charles had the decency to look ashamed, but Natalie was made of tougher material. People change, Eleanor. People grow. We aren't the same people we were 13 years ago. You're right, I said. You aren't the same people. You're older, you're deeper in debt, and you're more desperate. But fundamentally, you are exactly who you have always been. I stood and walked back toward the window, not because I needed to see the garden, but because I wanted them to sweat while I spoke. Do you want to know what I did with my time during these 13 years? While you were building your important lives and prioritizing your careers? Neither of them answered, but I could feel their attention like heat on my back. I learned things. I took courses. I read books. I made new friends. I discovered that I'm actually quite intelligent when there isn't someone telling me I'm a burden. I turned to face them. I also learned about investing, about financial planning, about how to protect assets from people who might try to take advantage. Charles's face went carefully blank. What do you mean? I mean, I didn't win the lottery and stuff the money under a mattress, Charles. I hired professionals. Good professionals. The kind who specialize in protecting people with money from relatives with questionable motivations. You hired lawyers, Natalie said, her voice going flat. Among others, I replied. I hired financial advisors, estate planners, even a private investigator. I smiled at their horrified expressions. You'd be surprised how much a motivated person can learn about someone's financial situation when they have the resources to find out. You investigated us. Charles's voice cracked on the last word. I investigated everyone, Charles. Friends, distant relatives, charities, investment opportunities. When you suddenly have considerable wealth, you learn very quickly that everyone wants something from you. I returned to my chair but didn't sit. The difference is that most people are honest about their intentions. Natalie's mask was gone completely now, replaced by something harder and more calculating. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that showing up here with your suitcases, demanding space in my house, and access to my money after 13 years of treating me like I was dead was a mistake. I finally sat down, taking the time to smooth my skirt, lift my coffee cup, and look at them both with absolute calm. I'm saying that if you think I am the same woman you discarded so many years ago, you are about to be sorely disappointed. The silence between us stretched tight as a wire. Charles looked like he was about to vomit. Natalie seemed to be calculating escape routes, but I wasn't finished with them, not even close. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times. I realized we had been sitting there for over an hour. Time flies when you're watching other people's carefully constructed plans collapse in real time. So, I said, setting the empty coffee cup on the table. Let's talk about what you really want. Not this nonsense about a family reunion. Not the alleged concern for my well-being. Let's have an honest conversation about why you are actually here. Charles opened his mouth, probably to launch into another rehearsed speech about family and concern, but I held up a hand. Before you answer, let me share some of the interesting information my investigators uncovered. I reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled out a manila folder. Did you know that people's financial records become quite accessible when you know where to look and have the right professionals asking the right questions? Natalie's eyes locked onto the folder as if it were a rattlesnake poised to strike. For example, I continued, opening the file, I learned that you've been living beyond your means for nearly 5 years. The consulting business, Charles claims, is just going through a slow period, hasn't had a legitimate client in 8 months. Charles's face turned white. How could you know something like that? The same way I know about the 3 credit cards you have maxed out, the loan you took out using the car as collateral, and the second mortgage on your house, on which you are already 2 months behind. I pulled out a sheet of paper. The same way I know you've been borrowing money from Natalie's parents, telling them it's to expand the business, when in reality, it's just to keep the lights on. You had no right, Natalie whispered, but there was no real anger in her voice, just the hollow sound of someone who had been found out. No, right? I laughed, and this time it was a genuinely amused laugh. Honey, I had every right the moment you decided to show up at my door making demands. In the business world, they call that due diligence. Something you might have learned if either of you had ever run a successful business. Charles slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. We're in trouble, okay? We're in serious trouble. But that doesn't change the fact that you're my mother. That has to mean something. Yes, I replied. Yes, it means something. It means the reason I'm going to give you a chance. Exactly one. Be honest with me, I said. Cut the theater, stop the manipulation, and tell me exactly what you need and why. They looked at each other, some silent communication passing back and forth. Finally, Charles straightened up and met my gaze. We're going to lose everything, he said quietly. The house, the cars, probably Natalie's parents' money too. We owe about $850,000, and we have no way to pay it. $850,000, I repeated. That is a pretty deep hole you dug for yourselves. We made bad investments, Natalie added. Charles's partner kept most of the capital and disappeared. When we realized what had happened, it was already too late. For the first time since they arrived, they sounded like they were telling the truth. It didn't spark compassion in me, but it did spark curiosity. And you thought showing up here with demands and suitcases was your best strategy to get help? We thought, Charles said slowly, that if we presented it as a family reunion, like wanting to spend time with you, it would be easier than admitting we needed money. Easier? I asked. For whom? Charles had the decency to look ashamed. For us. We thought it would be easier for us. Finally, a moment of real honesty. It was almost refreshing. Fine, I said, closing the folder and pushing it aside. Now we're getting somewhere. $850,000, I repeated, letting the figure float in the air like smoke from a fire. That's quite an achievement. Most people take decades to accumulate that level of debt. Charles winced. We know how it sounds. Do you really? I replied, because it sounds like two people who made a series of catastrophically bad decisions and are now looking for someone else to pay for them. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me about this partner who supposedly stole your money. Marcus Vance, Natalie said quickly. He was Charles's roommate in college. They started the consulting firm together 5 years ago. Marcus Vance, I repeated, pulling out my phone. The funny thing about having good investigators, Charles, is that they tend to be very thorough. I swiped a finger across my notes. Marcus Vance didn't steal anything. Marcus Vance discovered his partner was siphoning money from the company for personal expenses and gambling debts. He reported it to the authorities and dissolved the partnership to protect himself. The silence in my living room was so absolute I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That's not what happened, Charles said weakly. No, because according to the investigation file, yes, there is an open file. You have been under investigation for business fraud for the last 8 months. The district attorney hasn't decided yet if they are going to press charges. Natalie's face took on the color of old paper. How do you know all that? The same way I know you told your parents that Charles has a rare disease requiring expensive treatments to get money from them. The same way I know you borrowed $50,000 from 3 different relatives using 3 different stories. I set the phone down carefully on the table. You aren't just broke. What you did was a scam. We aren't criminals, Charles protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Oh, no, I said. What would you call lying to your family, claiming you have a serious illness to get money? What would you call stealing from your own company? What would you call showing up here after 13 years with a sob story designed to manipulate me into sustaining your fraudulent lifestyle? For the first time since they arrived, I saw real fear in their eyes. Authentic fear is honest. We never wanted it to get this far, Natalie whispered. But it did get this far, I replied. And now you are here in my house, asking me to bail you out of the consequences of your own decisions. I stood up and walked to the window again. Here is what is going to happen now. I felt them both holding their breath behind me, waiting for the ultimatum I was about to deliver. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. Such a peaceful scene for such an explosive moment. You are going to take your suitcases, I said without turning around, and you are going to leave my house. But before you do, we are going to have a conversation about honesty and consequences. Mom, please. Charles started. I haven't finished. I turned to look at them, and I could see both were on the verge of panic. You see, the interesting thing about hiring investigators is that you learn all kinds of unexpected information. For instance, I discovered I wasn't the only family member you cut off 13 years ago. So, you leave here empty-handed, I said, and I will make sure your entire family knows exactly why. Every relative you asked for money, every friend you lied to, every person you scammed will receive a detailed report of who you really are. You wouldn't do that, Charles whispered. Try me, I replied. I've had 13 years to think about what I would do if I ever had the chance to teach you about consequences. Do not test my resolve now. The clock struck 4. They had been here 2 hours, and I could see the exact moment they realized their plan had gone spectacularly wrong. We need time to think, Natalie said finally. I didn't answer. What you need is to choose. You can accept my offer and start rebuilding your lives the hard way, or you can keep looking for easy money and shortcuts. But you cannot do both, and you cannot do either in my house. Charles looked like he was about to cry. After all these years, after all the pain he had caused, he looked like a lost child. For an instant, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. There is one more thing, I said, just as they started to get up to leave. Something I think you should know before making your decision. I walked to my desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. The return address was from a law firm in Boston, and it was dated 3 weeks ago. It arrived right after the news of my lottery win started circulating through town. I held the envelope as if it contained dynamite. This is from a lawyer representing someone who has been looking for you for quite some time. The color drained from both their faces simultaneously. Who? Natalie whispered. Marcus Vance. I opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. You remember him, right? Your former business partner? The same one you claimed stole company money? Charles's hands started to shake. What does he want? He wants his money back. The $75,000 you took from the company account before dissolving the partnership. The money whose absence he discovered only after his accountant did a full audit following the accusations you launched against him. That wasn't how it was, Charles said. but his voice was barely audible. No? Because according to this letter, Marcus Vance has been cooperating with the district attorney to build a case against you. He's been waiting to see if you would come forward voluntarily to make restitution. I folded the letter carefully. He found out I won the lottery and thought maybe that would motivate you to do the right thing. Natalie gripped the arm of the sofa so hard her knuckles turned white. What does that mean? It means Marcus Vance is offering you the same choice I am. You can make full restitution and take responsibility for what you did, or he can move forward with pressing criminal charges. I put the letter back in the envelope. The only difference is that his deadline expires tomorrow. Tomorrow, Charles's voice cracked. Tomorrow. He gave you until 5 p.m. to contact his lawyer and arrange payment. I looked at the two of them, watching the last shred of their composure crumble. So, you see, my offer isn't just about family reconciliation or teaching you lessons about consequences. It's about keeping you out of prison. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear their minds working, calculating, looking for some angle they hadn't considered. You planned all of this, Natalie said. Finally, I said. Have you been in contact with Marcus Vance? Yes, I admitted. He got in touch with me the day after my lottery win was announced in the paper. He wanted to know if I was aware of what my son had been doing and if I would be willing to help clean up his mess. And what did you tell him? I told him that depended entirely on whether my son was willing to take responsibility for his actions. I stood up and walked to the mantel, picking up that old photo of Charles on his college graduation day. Marcus Vance is a good man, Charles. He didn't deserve what you did to him. Neither did your Aunt Sarah, nor Natalie's parents, nor any of the other people you hurt. Charles was crying now, tears running down his face. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, I replied. And now you have to decide what kind of person you want to be from here on out. I put the photo back in its place and turned to look at them both. You can accept my help and Marcus Vance's mercy, work hard to fix things, and perhaps salvage a small piece of your integrity. Or you can keep running, keep lying, keep looking for easy solutions to problems you created yourself. Some choice, Natalie murmured. It's the only one that matters, I said. The choice to be honest. Finally, they looked at each other, and I could see 13 years of bad decisions weighing on their shoulders. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and the newspaper, waiting. Marcus Vance had given them until 5 p.m., but I had a feeling they would call much sooner. People facing the possibility of prison rarely sleep well. The phone rang at 8:47 a.m. Mom. Charles's voice sounded like he hadn't slept all night. We accept your conditions. All of them? Both of us. Yes. Natalie agrees too. We want to make things right. I set my coffee cup down and leaned back in my chair. Charles, before I wire any money or make any calls for you, I need you to answer one question honestly. Okay. If I hadn't won the lottery, if I were still just your mother with no money, living in a small apartment, would you have ever called me? Would you have tried to rebuild our relationship? The pause stretched so long I actually thought the call had dropped. No, he said finally. Probably not. I was too ashamed of what I had done, too proud to admit I was wrong, and too afraid you wouldn't forgive me. It was the first completely honest thing he had said since showing up at my door. It hurt, but it was also exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said. Now I have something to tell you. What? I forgive you. Not because you are sorry now, not because you are in trouble and need help, but because holding on to anger for 13 years was poisoning me more than it was you. I picked up my coffee again, surprised to see my hands were steady. I forgive you, Charles. But forgiving you doesn't mean trusting you. Trust has to be earned back, and that is going to take time. I understand. Do you? Really? Because earning back trust means years of consistent behavior. It means therapy, hard work, and proving you have changed, not just promising you will. I understand, he repeated. And this time, I believed him. Good. I will call the lawyer this morning and Marcus Vance this afternoon. You and Natalie need to be in their respective offices before the end of the business day today. I paused, looking at my garden where the first spring flowers were beginning to open, and Charles, yes, this is your last chance. If you blow this, if you lie again, if you try any shortcuts or hurt anyone else I care about, you will be on your own forever. I know. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about second chances and the difference between forgiving and enabling abuse. Some people would say I was too hard on my son, that family should stick together no matter what. But those people never spent 13 years wondering what they had done wrong. They never felt the specific pain of being discarded by their own child. They never had to completely rebuild their sense of identity after being told they were worthless. I learned something important in those 13 years. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's just fear dressed up in nicer clothes. My phone vibrated with a text message. It was from my sister, Sarah. Heard through the grapevine that Charles showed up. How did it go? I replied, typing slowly. He is getting a second chance. Whether he deserves it or not remains to be seen. And how are you? I looked around my house, my refuge, the life I had built after losing everything I thought was important. The life where I made my own decisions, set my own boundaries, and never again had to beg for a place at a table that should have always been mine. I am doing great, I typed. Better than great. I am free. 2 years later, Charles would finish paying back every last dollar of what he had stolen. Natalie would discover she was actually quite good at managing a small business when she wasn't trying to get rich overnight. And I would wake up every morning in my own house, living my own life, finally understanding what it meant to be truly wealthy. It had nothing to do with lottery numbers and everything to do with never again accepting less than I deserved. The money was nice, though. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Yeah,